That's better. Okay, hi everybody. How is everybody doing here? Are we enjoying SCaLE? Good, good, me too. I'm loving both the audience and the organization. Really great. Good to see all of you here. So, I'm going to talk about privacy. My name is Jos Poortvliet, I'm Dutch. I wasn't born there, but my parents were. Nice farm in the southwest of the Netherlands, one of the islands, Zeeland. Called for a reason like that, as you probably can imagine. I've been around open source for about a dozen years now, first being involved in the KD community, later OpenSUSE, and now ownCloud. So today I'm going to talk about all the good stuff of the cloud. I'm going to talk about the slightly less good part of the cloud, which has a little bit to do with things like security, privacy, and owning your data. And then we're going to talk about what you can do to, well, keep your data your own, how to protect your privacy. We're also going to get to a little bit of federated cloud technology. I didn't have this in my description of the talk, which is because this actually came up pretty recently. It's one of the new things in ownCloud 8, and the founder of ownCloud is going to talk a little bit about this in the last 10 minutes of the presentation. If you have questions at any point in time, please just wave at me, interrupt, jump around, get my attention one way or another. I will be very happy to answer them. I have no problem being interrupted at all. So, let's start with the good side of the cloud. So, I don't think I need to tell you too much about this, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure most of you here use one or another cloud service here or there. And the cloud is really awesome. I mean, the big boys, like these big companies, Google, Microsoft, Apple, they've built some pretty awesome service. I know that with the new Mac OS X, and if you have an iPhone, you start typing a SMS on your phone, you come home, you can continue on the same text message on your laptop, you click on send, it gets sent. And this is the kind of stuff that is super convenient, and it helps us out literally every day. We share files with one another. If your Android phone gets stolen, do you lose all your data? No, you don't, because it's all on the cloud. And the next Android phone you have, you log in, and you have all your files there. And you go to the App Store, and it says, oh, you want to reinstall all your apps? Yeah, sure, go ahead, bang, you're back up and running. I mean, this is stuff that's genuinely useful, and we all use this every day, private and at our companies. So this is cool, and I don't want to diss this because this is stuff, we all care about, right? Now, so it makes your data accessible everywhere, as I just said, Google, but you play games online, right? All our data goes online, your files, your contacts, your calendar, you chat with people online, documents you share with others, it's even free or very cheap. Now, when you're talking about stuff that's free or very cheap, you got to think like somebody got to pay for this stuff somewhere, right? And there's this rule that says if you are not paying for something, you're not the customer, you're the product. And this is something I think a lot of us don't realize day to day. But there's a bad side to the cloud. Now, ask yourself these questions. Where is my stuff? Who owns it? Actually, do we still own it? I mean, if it's on somebody else's server, who reads the terms of service, right? There's even this beautiful website, terms of service didn't read. There are people who actually read terms of service for you and rate them. It's something you should check out, by the way. You can Google this. But there is a problem here. Who has access to this stuff? How is it being used by other people? Sometimes people get an outrage about, new rules from Facebook and from Tumblr and from, Snapchat, but in the end, it's not like you have a choice. So in the end, you end up using these services anyway. What do they do with it? The thing is, why it matters, this is a question of privacy. Privacy is important. So I'm gonna spend a couple of slides on why it matters. Now, a lot of people say, you must have heard this or seen this or even thought this, you've got nothing to hide. Now, the thing is, this is not something that gets at the core of privacy. To put it mildly, there's more to privacy as having something to hide. So I'm going to argue, first of all, that you do have something to hide. And if you didn't, you should. And again, it's not even the point of privacy. Privacy is not about hiding things. It's a pretty fundamental need of people. So let's talk about this for a second. You do have something to hide. And I mean, it's not stuff that's terribly bad or illegal. I mean, there is so much in terms of rules and regulations. There are 27,000 pages of federal statutes and 10,000 administrative regulations in the US. How sure are you that you're not breaking at least a dozen of them? Probably a few dozen. I mean, you are. That's just pretty certain. If somebody would know everything about you, every step you take, if somebody would know all of that and they had the authority to put you in jail for breaking any of these regulations, they could at any single point in time. They could lock you up legally because you did something wrong without even knowing there was a rule anywhere near the thing that you just did wrong. I mean, there is silly stuff like possessing a live lobster. There are states in the US where this is illegal, right? I mean, how do you even get those things to the store without possessing them at some point, right? There are really silly rules. I believe it's Chicago where it's Washington. It's illegal to be smelly in Washington. Who judges that? What is being smelly? Using too much perfume? I mean, it's used to keep homeless people out of places where they don't want them. But you can use this for other stuff, can't you? Right? I mean, you use deodorant. Oh, you're smelly. But there will always be a way to abuse rules. Rules aren't just everywhere and they're spreading crazy. But the problem is also, how do you interpret them? I mean, that's what lawyers do, and if you ever ask a lawyer, can I do X, a lawyer won't even answer it. They'll tell you, well, there is some risk associated. Of course there is. And there might be an alien invasion. Right? You can't even get answers on these questions when you need them. There's a problem there, folks. And if somebody, again, knows everything about you, they'll be able to find something against you. So, normally we have privacy that protects us. Unless there's a good reason for police, for any authority to investigate you, they can't. That means if you did something really minor wrong at some point in your life, but there was no reason for them to look into you at that time, it won't come and haunt you later on. Privacy protects you from that. Well, it doesn't, not anymore, because all this stuff is getting online. What you did as a kid, I'm sure anyone in the room here did something illegal when they were a kid. Will it ever come back to haunt you? No, it won't. Because, back then, there was no Facebook, not everything was being recorded, so you're fine, you're safe. Will your kids be equally safe for all the bad stuff they do as kids, as all kids do, inevitably? Probably not. This is something to think about. There's an issue here. I'm Dutch, and we Dutch, we remember what happened in World War II. Did you know that the biggest percentage of Jews deported in any country in Europe was from the Netherlands? The Germans, the Nazis, they got most Jews, like in percentage of the population. The reason for that is because, we wrote everything down, and one of the things we had very well documented was the ethnicity of people. So the only thing the Nazis had to do was to go to the local municipalities, ask for a list of all the Jews, which they got. After all, they were in charge. They were the legal governing entity after all, and they had to just round them up. And if some are missing, they even knew how many people they were missing and where they had to look for. Sure, people were hiding, but if you know that there must be 3 more, it's pretty easy to get them. Just put a couple of people against the wall and tell everybody else that if they don't give them up, 3 more to go, you'll shoot them. Right? It was real hard to hide people and very dangerous because the Germans knew exactly how many there were. Did anybody write this stuff down for that reason in 1930, 1920, 1910? Of course not. This was just, you record anything. Why not? It's not a problem. But if you start to record stuff, you need to be aware that things change. In the future, rules might be different. Something that's totally okay, legal, and something nobody cares about today might become illegal 10 years from now. And if somehow it got recorded that you did that, who knows? They might think that it's a good idea to do something about it, even though it's long past for you. So again, there is a problem there. Yeah. The thing is, you need to be able to hide things. It's not even about changing rules. It's not even about vague rules or having so many rules you can't even know what rules there are. It's also about the fact that sometimes rules need to change. And if there is a perfect law enforcement, rules don't change. Because nobody ever breaks them. So nobody would ever be aware of the fact that maybe they don't need to be there. There is no problem. There are a couple of examples here, and there are many more you can think of. People need to be able to be a little bit civil disobedience. I mean, again, you're in a country where people are very much aware of this. If you have a right for freedom of speech, for protest, but there are certain things you can't do, or you shouldn't do. Sometimes you still need to do them, for one reason or another. And if a government would have perfect control over its citizens, that wouldn't be a good thing, to put it mildly, because change wouldn't happen anymore. It would come to a complete still. So, well, lots of examples here. Again, the Dutch, we had laws around euthanasia, and they wouldn't have been there if people wouldn't first have broken the rules, which would then be challenged in court, and then you have change. That change usually comes before the laws adjust. This is natural, this is normal. But this means that moral progress in society would come to a standstill with perfect law enforcement. Now, the last point I'm going to ask a question first. How many of you have been to a psychologist or a psychiatrist? I think it's pretty ballsy for those of you who just stuck up their hand to do that, because I'm pretty sure there are more people in the room who didn't raise their hand. This is something you'd rather not talk about. So ask yourself, why is that? Let me make it a bit wider. Why do you use deodorant? Why do you shower? Why do you put certain clothes on? Why are we not all wearing the same thing? This is about how you present yourself to the outside world. People care about how other people see them. You don't think about this naturally, but seriously, at every point in the day, you are presenting a certain face to other people around you. For some people, there's a big gap between what they think, who they are, and what they present to the world, like in your work, when soliciting for a job, when you're out on a date, the gap is a little bit bigger between reality and what you present. In other moments, maybe it's smaller when you're with your spouse at home. But there's always, some matter of you caring about how other people see you. You see the link to privacy? This is about presenting who you are, both online and in real life. If for some people it is always possible to see everything about you, that means you can't present yourself the way who you are anymore. And there have been a lot of experiments done where, we looked at how people behave when they know they're being watched. They behave different. They make different choices. They do different things. Now, not even judging here whether it's good or bad, but if we know we're being watched, that changes our behavior. It changes who we are. It changes what you do, the choices you make. People are not free if they're being watched. I think this is a very fundamental thing. And again, it's something you don't really realize, but all these cameras they're putting up everywhere, they're changing how we behave. Not talking about doing bad things. You won't steal if someone is watching you, if a cop is watching. But it's not just that. It really changes what you do. You're being seen, you make an impression, and thus you make different choices. It's part of being human, that we can present ourselves the way we want. And violations of privacy take that away from us. And I think it's a really fundamental thing that we should care about. Okay, so I hope I have kind of given you an idea of why privacy is important. You should have, and you need something to hide. It's a fundamental human thing. So, and the key is here, if privacy is being eroded in society, whose privacy is being eroded? Who gets hurt? Big companies. Do they have a problem protecting their privacy? They don't. Right? Microsoft, the things they do that they don't want to be public, they won't be public. They got the resources to hide the things that they want to hide. And this goes for any big company. Same with governments. Governments aren't harmed if you hang up cameras everywhere. If police would do something they're not supposed to do, and there are cameras everywhere, don't you know that that data will get lost one way or another? They can protect themselves. Normal people can't. Grassroots political organizations can't. Yeah? It's always like the normal people whose privacy disappears. Not the privacy of the big companies, not the privacy of criminal organizations, because they too, by the way, have the resources to protect themselves. And government says, we're trying to do something about terrorism. Well, sorry, but terrorism have money. Terrorists have money. They have resources. That means that these things don't harm them. Sorry to bring it to you, but they have the knowledge and the experience and the technology to hide from these things. Violations of privacy, the changes to laws, they don't really impact them much. It only impacts maybe a lone person at home, but it mostly impacts grassroots political organizations and other things that, maybe the local politicians don't like. That's where the problem with this is. Annoying journalists, annoying local charity. There are very bad examples of this. Not long ago in Mexico, a doctor was killed for bad tweets by the local, terrorist, local gangs. Yeah, exactly. So you have a lot of local gangs there, and this doctor saw in the hospital often people come in who were shot up by gangs, local normal civilian citizens, and she would, under a pseudonym, take pictures and tweet about this and warn people that there was a gang fight going on somewhere. Basically, one of these voices against, all the bad stuff that's going on. Well, at some point, they figured out her identity, killed her, put a nice tweet out, of course, with a picture of her body. You can imagine, yes, it got taken down by Twitter. But the thing is, if you would make sure that Twitter has the real contact details of everyone because you want to make sure the government can catch terrorists, these are the people who get hurt, not the terrorists, because they know how to fake an identity. They always have been. This is nothing new for them. Yeah? But when an organization, like a criminal organization wants to catch someone, they will find a way to get into Twitter and get at this data. That's where the problem is. So, what do we do? Now, let me make clear, there are things we need to do about this on multiple levels. There's a political level. That's where, for example, the user data manifesto comes in when it's about privacy. Frank is, the person actually who started this together with some other people. It's a manifesto that tries to explain or put, forward why and how we should protect our data. Now, this is on the political level. We have organizations like the Free Software Foundation, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, lots of other organizations that do try to protect us on the political level. And that's good, and you should support that, right? But I'm more involved in technological projects, so I'm going to move on and talk about those things. So, one good way of protecting our privacy and our data is to decentralize. Federate our data. This is how the internet started, right? Anybody would be able to run a site with their own website, with their own web page, and all the data would be everywhere, and the whole internet would be connected peer-to-peer, and you couldn't take down the whole thing, because that was the whole point of it. That's how it was developed. Unfortunately, today, pretty much all our data is in the hands of 5, 6, 7 huge corporations who have it all in, their 5, 6, 7 big all spread out over the world, but still, they own it, they control it. Now, we need to decentralize again. There are all kinds of technologies for that, BitTorrent-like protocols, open source technologies. People need to start running their own servers again. Right? A real-life analogy here basically, I think, translates online. Right? You should use encryption and keep things out of sight. You do that at home and in the neighborhood as well. If you, for example, have a string of break-ins in the neighborhood, you will put extra locks on your door. If everything would be in one bank, after the bank has been robbed, everything is gone. You can't do anything anymore. But if all the valuables would be in the different houses in the neighborhood, now absolutely, it's harder to break into a bank than an individual house. But if they have to catch all the houses, that won't happen in one night. That'll take time. You catch one. And online, there are a lot of ways to, of course, catch a lot of servers at once. But if they all run different technologies, different operating systems, it's a lot harder for hackers to get at this valuable data that they need from all of us, that they need to analyze and find out things about us they can use to abuse in one way or another, either by government, companies, or criminal organizations. So getting our data spread out is one of the keys to securing it and keeping it out of the hands of, well, whoever wants to abuse it on every level. So, and one note, because that keeps coming up, you often have these people calling out for backdoors for the police. I mean, lately I think it was Cameron who basically said, we need to have a backdoor. Bruce Schneier said something interesting about this. The thing is, there's one infrastructure on the world, like the internet, and if you try to make backdoors on something like SSL, how are you going to make sure that only the good guys have access to these backdoors? You can't. I mean, this is fundamentally, technically not possible. So having a backdoor for police simply means it's not secure. It's as simple as that. And the Greeks actually tried that because they had like a backdoor in their telephony system, which then was used by the mob and the mafia to figure out which judges were against them and kill them. Okay? That's your own weapon being used against you in a pretty nasty way. So we have to realize there's one system. We're either all secure or we're all insecure. You can't have a world in which, the NSA has access to all our data so that they can find out who the terrorists are and protect us against them, but the Chinese don't have access to it, or the Russians, or big criminal organizations, or anyone else who might not want to have access to your data. It's either everyone has access to it, at least the ones who have the money, of course, not normal people, right? We won't be able to break into Dropbox, but a big criminal organization can break into Dropbox if they want. Governments can break into Dropbox if they want. Hell, they do it. We know they do because, all the revelations by Snowden have shown that, the NSA has access to the backbone of Google, and I'm pretty sure so have several big criminal organizations as well. So they know what judges are against them, how to manipulate elections locally, maybe even, on the national level. I don't know. Now, this stuff is already happening, and it will certainly happen more. And yeah, it's also about balance here, right? I mean, I understand why governments want to get access to this data, and I don't think necessarily that they shouldn't have. I mean, if there's a good reason to try and catch someone because, you have a reason to doubt that, they're good guys, I mean, there always have been warrants, right? There always have been telephone taps. The thing is, in 1994, there were 919 telephone taps in the whole year done over all of the United States. In 2008, I believe there was an arsonist active in Berlin. I live in Berlin. And the police decided to, try to tap into telephones to try and find the arsonist. In a couple of months' time, they tapped 4.2 million connections just to find one arsonist. They caught him, but not because of the telephone taps, by the way. Balance, I think, has gone a little bit in the direction of let's just tap everything. And at that point, you don't even find anything anymore because you have too much data to sift through. And this has been documented several times. It's even with the 9/11 attacks. All the information was there. It was the same with Charlie Hebdo. All the information was there. The Secret Services knew about these guys. They knew what they were doing, but they had so much other stuff to look at, which was all irrelevant, that they didn't even do anything in the end. Too much data actually gets in the way here. So again, if we want more effective police than giving them more data, it's not a solution. It's actually adding to the problem. So I think you should be convinced now. Yes, cloud is awesome, and all these technologies are awesome, the fact that we can do this stuff, but there's a problem. Privacy is being eroded, and it's not helping anything in the right direction. Right? If we were paying this price and actually getting something back, well, you can at least have a discussion about it, but that's not the case. Certainly not. So, we need decentralization. I already talked about that. What do we need? It needs to be decentralized. It needs to be, separated. People need to be able to run it themselves. So this is where ownCloud comes in. It's just one solution. There are many other technologies out there, and I don't want to say this is the only one. but this is what I know, what I can talk about, so I will. So the core of ownCloud is syncing and sharing files, syncing and sharing data. Doesn't have to be files per se. There's a whole bunch of other things you can sync and share, like contacts, calendars, mail, and other things. But this is at the core of it. And it ticks more boxes. It's open source. Any technology needs to, well, if you want to run it at home, you need to own it. You need to make sure that it does what you think it does. It can only be done with open source. Any solution to the problem of privacy needs to be open source. Any solution needs to be easy to use. If it's not easy to use, then what are you getting? You're going to have to put in extra effort just to be able to use it. If something is not as easy to use as Dropbox or Google Drive, you're not really gaining anything because people won't want to use it. After all, the cloud is easy, the cloud is nice, that's why we use it. That's for good reason. It helps us in our lives, it makes our lives easier. Well, it should. I mean, you shouldn't accept solutions that make things harder because maybe you do, you're willing to make a compromise, but most other people won't. And you have to realize that if all of us would be using ownCloud here, and everybody who uses Linux would use ownCloud, and everybody who even is at home in technology would use ownCloud, that's still a couple of % of the population, and it still wouldn't help anything. So any solution needs to be easy to use for everybody, not just for technical people. Now, I'm not saying we're there with ownCloud, but it's very important for us to be super easy to use and super easy to deploy, and we're working on making it more easy because this is very core to the problem. It needs to be easy. It needs to actually help people move forward. So, ownCloud, well, 1.8 million, the number keeps going up. I think we're now usually thinking we're over 2 million users. It's hard to say, of course, because it's open source. Anyone can download it, run it at home. But there are a lot of users of ownCloud already. You're in good company. Now, it's cross-platform. So ownCloud itself ideally runs on a Linux system, at least. I think that's the best place to run it on. But if you really want, you can run it on Windows and Apple as well. You'll just be in less well-supported waters. So it has synchronization apps. So when you run ownCloud on a server and you put your data there, you also want to be able to access it. Now for that you have a web interface, but you also have clients, like a mobile client for Android, mobile client for iOS. And these two are all open source, by the way, which in case of iOS is a little bit difficult, because Apple doesn't really like open source, so we had to do some licensing tricks, but it is open source. You can contribute to it if you want. Now, there are also third-party applications. I think there's one for Yola, there's an app also for Firefox OS. So, you know, as a community, we try to support as much as possible. One of the cool things about ownCloud is not just that it's multi-platform, but also that it has external storage. So you don't actually have to put all your data in ownCloud itself. You can leave it where it is. So if you already have a NAS at home, if you run an FTP server at work, these things you can actually mount this data in ownCloud. So you keep the data where it is, but you access it via ownCloud, have it then available via the web interface. You can share it with other people while the data stays where it is. Only when you need it, you know, from your laptop, it goes via ownCloud to your laptop. All of this, of course, secured by SSL and other encryptions. Cool thing is, there's also Dropbox support for external storage. So if you still have Dropbox or Google Drive and a lot of data on it, you can mount it in ownCloud. Now, of course, the reason why Google and other parties can offer you so much data storage for free is because they're snooping at it and looking at it and, you know, indexing it. Well, there's an encryption app for ownCloud, which will essentially encrypt all the files that go then to these cloud services, which gives you the security that you need, and well, it costs them money, I suppose. Tough luck. So, yeah, it has all the easy things, right? I mean, I'm going to guess most of you are aware of like how these nice cloud technologies work. If you have, you know, pictures, you put them in a folder, you can share the folder with other people, they get a nice gallery, they can download the pictures. You know, you can even give people a link where they can upload files as well. All the good stuff. Then, it's easy to use. I mean, as I said, it just uses Linux, or it can be run on pretty much any Linux with Apache, MySQL, PHP, but also people run it on Nginx and other web servers. It's pretty easy, relatively speaking, to hack on or to look at the code and check it, because it's PHP with the usual HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. available from all the platforms as we mentioned. And one of the cool things about it is it scales very well. So there are people running it on a Raspberry Pi. I would personally say use the Raspberry Pi 2, because in terms of performance, the older model is really, well, depends on who you talk to, they will say that it's just good enough or just not good enough. But the new one is basically plenty for, a home user. Connect a couple of hard drives via USB and you're pretty much good to go. But it scales. Like one of the users of ownCloud is CERN, the guys smashing atoms there in Switzerland. They have pretty large amounts of data there, like terabytes, petabytes. It works for them. Now we have cloud deployments in Germany. I believe there's a 500,000 user cloud deployment. It works for them as well. So there is scaling abilities where you need it. And I think that's pretty important. Now, another thing that's really cool is that ownCloud is a platform you can build on. It's very modular. The core of ownCloud is pretty small. Even sharing, which is pretty core to what ownCloud is implemented as an app. So it's actually separate functionality. There are over 200 different apps available, and like per week, 7 to 10 apps are updated. So there's a lot of activity of people developing apps, improving apps, updating them, adding functionality and features. Of course, when you say 200, you have to realize this is apps, as in typically a lot of them are not that good or maybe outdated. But there are some real gems out there, things like gallery, music players, video streaming also, note-taking apps. There's some really good stuff. I'll get to some examples later on. And they get a lot of downloads as well. The top 10 has somewhere between 12,000 and 28,000 downloads. So a lot of people are actually downloading and installing these apps and using them, which is good. But of course, in the end, the central point is you own it. Now, ownCloud is open source under the AGPL license, so it's fully open. All the development happens on GitHub. That gives you the ownership and the security that you need to know that your data is yours and stays yours. I think that's really important. Now, ownCloud Inc., company active in the ownCloud community, develops, of course, features and functionality that its customers want. So if you have a larger enterprise and you need a phone number to call when something goes wrong, there is a company behind ownCloud that can help with that. But for a lot of use cases, the open source is perfectly fine. And I think that's important as well. So it's a very open, healthy project. We have somewhere between 80 and 100 people contribute to ownCloud each month. That's big. That puts us in the top 1 or 2% of open source projects. We've had over 700 people contribute to ownCloud over its 5 years lifetime. So it's a very healthy, active project. And of course, we welcome more people to help out and make ownCloud better. We're just, by the way, 5 years old then. We had our anniversary like 3 weeks ago. So yay for that. Now, I'm going to go through a couple of screenshots to give you an idea of ownCloud. However, if you have any questions, this is also a very nice time to shoot them at me. Yes?
You mentioned Dropbox integration, so you basically mounting Dropbox.
Exactamente.
You access my ownCloud now.
Yeah.
If you encrypt the objects that are in Dropbox and present them as clear text or whatever to the ownCloud users, what about apps like mobile apps that have direct Dropbox integration?
Yes, they will find a encrypted file there on Dropbox and that won't work anymore.
Can you selectively say this directory, do not encrypt this within ownCloud? Like leave this clear text, but keep this other one encrypted?
That's a good question. I don't think so at the moment. No, not at the moment. But it's a great idea, and if you know PHP.
So essentially all those mobile apps are just break.
Yes. Yes, if you turn on encryption, then you can't. Well, you can still get at the underlying storage, but it's encrypted, so there's not much point to that anymore. Otherwise, of course, if you don't have the encryption on, then getting it directly at the underlying storage is one of the nice things about ownCloud. If you have, like, as a company, you run a SharePoint, and as in my experience in most companies, about a third of the employees love SharePoint and 2/3 hate it. Well, for those who hate it, you can have ownCloud as a layer on top, and they can use ownCloud, which provides probably an easier to use, a more familiar user interface, while the guys and girls who prefer to use SharePoint directly can keep using it. And I think this is a big plus, and this of course also goes for FTP and NFS and this NAS that you have at home. You can still use it directly if you want, and you can also do it via ownCloud. But again, that breaks down indeed when you enable the encryption app. Yeah.
Is that anything that's on the roadmap?
Yeah, you say yes. I mean, well, yeah, roadmap. No, I don't think anybody is planning on doing this, but it is definitely a feature. I'm sure it's already like as a feature request in GitHub. Let me put it that way. If not, feel free to add it. All right, cool. Or do pull requests are much more welcome than feature requests, but we like them both. Yes.
Don't you have an app, ownCloud app? Wouldn't it go to your ownCloud server?
Yes. So we have an iOS and Android app. Yes. Yes, but yes, indeed. So ownCloud also provides an API. So if those applications would support the ownCloud API, then you don't have this problem either. But yeah, there are ownCloud. So there's a synchronization app. Well, we'll go to screenshots. So let's move on. So this is welcome to ownCloud. We have a nice welcome screen that runs the first time you log in, where you can see where you can get the apps on the app stores, and contacts, calendar. You can access your files via WebDev. So actually, any app that supports WebDev will be able to get at your files quite easily via ownCloud because it just provides a WebDev interface. Mobile apps are there and desktop apps. So one of the nice things that I really like about the desktop app is you don't actually have to sync everything. You can just pick a number of remote and local folders that are synchronized. And even in each of those folders, you can choose what to sync and say, okay, synchronize. Please don't synchronize my, 8 terabytes of movies to my laptop because, probably won't fit. So it's pretty granular, and that helps you a lot keeping, the stuff that's relevant for each device on that device and keep the rest off. So the mobile interfaces give you access to the files, allow you to download them, view them, keep them synchronized between your mobile devices and your server, and of course, and the rest of the devices, as well as share files with other people. This is a files view. Not much to say about it. I think you can drag and drop, so you can just drag files from your file manager and drop them here on the view, and they will get uploaded. You can have multiple, if you drop 5 files and then you drop another 10, they're still uploading. That all works smooth. So it's all pretty nicely implemented, I think. Yes, there is. There's a versioning app that automatically keeps like all the versions of the files with a decrease in granularity. So first it does like 1 version per second, and then 1 per minute, per hour, per day, per week, because otherwise, I think the overhead at most is 50%. Sharing, so there are a lot of sharing options there. I mean, you can of course just share by name, and then it'll autocomplete other users on your cloud. But you can also share a link that you can send to people. You can protect it with a password, with an expiration date or not. You can then set whether they can edit files or not, and whether they can upload files in the folder as well. Yes?
So is the domain entirely under your control, with the user's control, or is there some third-party web?
No.
secretcloud.com?
No, it's on your own. We made secretcloud.com here up, but you would run it on your own server, yes. Yes, it's entirely self-hosted. Of course, there are also other ways of getting it on cloud. There are a lot of companies that actually provide hosted on cloud. There are about 40, 50 providers out there, actually. So if you don't want to run it at home and you don't want to manage it yourself on a VPS, then actually you can also simply use, ownCloud as a service. Of course, this decentralizes less nicely than when you do it at home. On the other hand, these providers probably know more about security than you do, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. I think it wouldn't be necessarily bad if everybody would run ownCloud at a hosted provider they know and trust. There are, first of all, countries that actually have decent privacy laws where, the owner of a hosting company would actually go to jail for trying to sell your data instead of going to jail for not trying to make enough money on your data. And of course, I know even in Berlin, I sometimes have people come to me and ask, do you know a hosting provider in Berlin? Because then I can go there and look them in the eyes and see whether I trust them or not. I think this is actually a good, thing to separate things out and spread it out a bit, but still have people who know what they're doing keep an eye on security. So I don't think there's anything wrong with being hosted in the cloud per se. I think the problem lies with everyone being hosted by one of these 5 big providers. That's where the problem is. Well, as administrator, you can, restrict this sharing or enforce that your users, let's say maybe your kids or your wife, have to set a password on every share to improve the security a little bit, or always set a default or mandatory expiration date. So this, you can control basically how much security you can enforce also on the users.
Does this support 2FA?
Sorry?
Two-factor auth?
No, but it does support, for example, LDAP, so you can do that via a workaround that way. Well, there's a calendar app. I mean, what more can I say? It has all the basic functionality. CardDAV support, so it works natively with iOS, and for Android there are lots of third-party calendar apps, so the ownCloud app doesn't duplicate that functionality. There are open source apps that do that, so we didn't really feel it's worth the time to build another app that does calendar with CalDAV. This is pretty cool actually. I like the activity view. So basically what it does is it shows you like when somebody shared a file with you, or when you did something. You can configure it to show and even send you emails when something happens on your cloud, and this is per user. So as a user you can get a notification when somebody shares a file with you, by mail, and you have this view where you can see what happened on your cloud. So Pictures app, pretty neat. Music player, password manager, documents editor. This is actually collaborative document editing. It's pretty cool. So with multiple people you can edit the document together. As you can see, this was for ownCloud 7 already. App has been slightly improved for ownCloud 8. Always more room for improvement, but the point is there are a lot of apps out there, a lot of different things that you can do with ownCloud. Now, these are available in different ways, so we kind of have levels of like how easy you can get an app. There are apps that actually used to be bundled with ownCloud, but that you now have to click on enable, and then they're automatically downloaded and installed in the ownCloud App Store app. There are apps that are developed by community members or other people that have been checked by our security team. These are also installable with one click from the App Store. I mean, we even I have people who come and say it's so hard to install apps from the App Store. And I'm like, it's one click. But then they hadn't realized that is actually an App Store, because you just click on the button enable. And the fact that it then downloads the app, installs it, and enables it is completely hidden away. What is harder to install are the apps from apps.owncloud.com. These are essentially unverified apps. And yeah, we don't want to make it too easy to shoot yourself in the foot. So you will have to go there and then decide for yourself whether you're willing to download the tarball, extract it in your own cloud, and adjust the permissions, and then run it. Because there's a risk associated to it. And honestly, if you're not able to do this, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. That's kind of the idea. So the apps that are checked are available very easy, one-click install. Apps that are provided by the wider open source community and we haven't had time to check yet, you can get them. I mean, you should be, but it takes a little more work, and I think that's a healthy barrier. Personal settings, admin configuration, encryption. I mean, it's pretty easy to use ownCloud. Here's actually the application manager. Apps have ratings. They show up with these ratings also in the application manager. You see there's just a disable button that will disable the app. If there's an upgrade available, you will see it there as well. And the configuration then shows up, in the admin configuration here. User management, as I said, LDAP is supported, so if you want to integrate with proprietary systems, then you have to go to ownCloud Inc. This is all open source, including what it integrates with, most of the time at least. And even upgrades are built in as an upgrade app that basically takes care of updates, newer versions.
Does that check to make sure that all the additional third-party apps that you've added in are compatible with the upgraded version?
Yes, it upgrades them as well. I'm not saying it never goes wrong, because this is one of the things, PHP, all these apps can just run. We're trying to improve the way the App Store and the app handling works. But overall, well, I haven't had any issues, and I have a bunch of weird apps installed. So, yeah.
Is there a way that security updates will get installed?
Yes, so this is the way security updates are installed, but major versions are also installed this way. Of course, and that's actually what I would recommend, there are also distribution packages available. We offer packages for all the major distributions in all the last major versions, and I would recommend to just use packages, because then there's a new version, do apt-get update or zipper revved up or etc., and then you get your packages, and that's, I think it's a better way than using this app, but this of course works on your NAS and this works on your, VPS, yes.
For high availability, is there a way to have redundancy or?
Yeah, so there are a couple of companies that use this, and there are blogs out there that explain you how to set it with HA proxy and other tools to set up a cluster and, share data and.
Already built into the system? Do they replicate, like if you set up?
So no, I mean, ownCloud, we don't want to duplicate stuff that already exists in an operating system level. So if you want to have like replication of files between different computers, then you should use something like cluster as or file system that does that.
So you can have like cluster in the background. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same with backups, right? There's no backup tool built in ownCloud, and ownCloud is not a backup tool. It's a synchronization tool, and sometimes people think, well, I have my files here and I have my files there, so that's kind of like a backup. Well, yeah, but if you delete your file here, it also gets deleted there, and that's not what a backup does, right? So be careful with this.
So the high availability can be handled the same way you handle any other web application.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, that's the key there. Yeah. So, well, Frank already stood up. He's going to talk a little bit about a really cool and exciting feature of ownCloud, which is federation. That's what he talked about last Friday at MIT, and I think this is really cool stuff, so here you go. Yes?
I would imagine that file system deduplication would not be very effective running a file system like that.
No.
Any sort of deduplication?
No, this is also something where we rely on file system functionality. With encryption, yeah, that's I understand. That's makes the amount of files that can be deduplicated like a bit, fewer. But no, we don't have that. We usually use file systems functionality for that.
On the storage layer.
Yes.
Also,
Yeah.
It's not really a file system.
Yeah. No. So I want to talk a little bit about federated clouds. This is more like a future concept. We already have like lots of that implemented for ownCloud 8, but this is more like a next step concept for us. Just first of all, Jos already did an awesome job with explaining what ownCloud actually is and isn't, but just to remind everybody what we mean here with cloud file sync and share. So this is basically, the idea is like, I don't know, there's a person here and there's a person here in Japan and one in Australia, and we have like a shared folder, and someone like synchronizes a file from their desktop to this folder, and then it appears on the shared folder on the other side of the world, and we can all nicely collaborate, right? This is all how it works with Dropbox and Google Drive and all these other services, right? This is like file sync and share in the cloud, and there are different ways to do this. There is the first approach that we call like the first generation cloud, and it basically works like that, right? There is a centralized cloud in the middle, and then we have all the users in the world basically connect to this one instance or to this one hosting center, depending what it is, and this company or whoever runs it in the middle sits like in the middle of the thing like a spider in the net, and this is like this centralized cloud, right? It's, as Jos explained, very nice because it's so easy to use. It's very fast. It's just easy. But the problem here is, of course, that it has a few drawbacks. Right? It's very centralized. Then speed. You might wonder, hey, why is this a speed issue? Well, as Jos mentioned, we have people like CERN who have petabytes of data, huge universities with lots of data. Well, if you have to synchronize your data to the other side of the world first, only because you want a shared folder with someone next door, and you can't use like the 10 gigabit or whatever network speed, you have to upload everything through the web or to the net, then speed is an issue. Then cost, well, as we know, it's very cheap at the moment, but if you have lots of data, if you really want to synchronize terabytes and petabytes, well, probably not so much. data location, all the privacy, who knows about the backdoors here, all the problems. So this leads basically to the second generation, and this is basically what ownCloud is today. So this is basically the idea that there can be lots of ownClouds, right? This can be my ownCloud at home, this can be ownCloud at a university, at a company somewhere, and we all have these different individual cloud instances. This is very cool, right? It's very secure. You have your firewall around this. It's very, very nice. It's very flexible. You integrate with your existing user accounts. It's very fast. It's open source. Very cool. The challenge here is, of course, well, if I use this here, this is my Raspberry Pi at home, and those are my family members, and then this is a university, here's another guy here, and we want to have a shared folder, as I explained at the beginning. This is not so easy, right? I mean, how can you actually share with someone on the other side of the world if they use different servers? That's the problem here. So the situation at the moment is that you basically have to compromise between easy sharing and great functionality and security. You can say, okay, all the data is like at home on my Raspberry Pi, on my NAS, and it's very secure, but I can't really collaborate with my friends and family on the other side of the world. Or we upload everything to Dropbox in Google and we can collaborate, but we lose control over the data. That's the problem. And this is what we want to solve with what we call the third generation, where we have this concept called cloud federation or server-to-server sharing. So this means that actually this ownCloud here can talk to this ownCloud over there, and then we actually can have a shared folder. So that's the idea. So maybe I'm this user here, and well, here's my desktop, and I synchronize this documents folder up to my cloud, my Raspberry Pi at home, and this pushes basically data to this cloud over there, which might be, I don't know, a company where I work with, and then basically pushes it to one user to the desktop of this user. There are different servers, but we can work together as if they are one. That's the idea. We introduced the basic feature, this basic feature in ownCloud 7, and a more advanced version in 8 already. So this is very cool. But you might ask, okay, so if all the data is like flowing around here on the internet, what about security? I mean, why exactly is this then here better than that? Right? It's basically my files flowing around on the web, and who has control over it? Who knows, right? So why exactly is this better? Well, it is better because it is actually possible to define rules here. To basically say, okay, this is my company, and I decide that I define certain rules. Maybe I say, my employees, they can share data with all the other ownClouds in the world, but not really if they are in North Korea. Yeah? I don't like that. Or they can all share the data, but only if they're in a specific LDAP group, like the certified VIP LDAP group. Or only if it's like in the marketing folder, but not in the engineering folder. Or only Word files, but not PDFs, or whatever. So basically, all these administrators of these individual domains, they can basically implement their policies and their rules in exactly this way as they want to, like based on different attributes. So this is basically the vision that we want to have. So cloud computing and file storage should be totally federated. There's no need to have it like centralized, because with an idea like that, we can work together, but have it under our control. Open source, open protocols, and the idea here is, if we remind ourselves, this is like the web or email works, right? Because email works like that. I can have my own mail server. In fact, I have, because I don't know, I know how it works. Other people don't. Other people decide to use Gmail or use their company account or something like that, but we can still send each other emails, right? So I did different open source implementations for that. I can run it at home or rent it from a provider, but we still can share and exchange data and send emails around. And I think this is exactly how it should work here too. So there is absolutely no technical reason to have one centralized like Dropbox system where all the files in the world are stored. There is no technical reason, there's only a business reason. So this is basically what we want to do, that we completely federate and distribute this, that everybody can decide, hey, I use a provider, I use a Raspberry Pi, I use my company ownCloud, I use my university ownCloud, and we can still work together. So this is the idea. I don't have a screenshot here from ownCloud 8, but you can basically already do this. So in ownCloud 8, if you go to the sharing dialog, you can type in, I want to share this folder with Jos at josownCloud.com or something like that. And then Jos get a sharing request. You can say, hey, do I want to accept this or not? Yes. And then you have access to my shared folder, even on different ownClouds. Okay, so this is the end of the presentation. Hopefully we have a nice follow-up discussion then. If you're interested in ownCloud, you can go to the website, download it. There's demo.owncloud.org where you can play around with it. It's an open source project. Everything is open source. Go to ownCloud.org contribute where you can see, hey, how you can get involved. Like Jos said, we have several hundred users already working on ownCloud documentation. And if you want to use ownCloud for your company, there's owncloud.com where you can get enterprise features too. So, thanks a lot.
Any more questions?
How often is ownCloud updated, the core?
So we release new features 4 times a year, and patch and security and bug fixes once a month. Yeah.
They have to agree about if it's an in and out.
It's basically an end, logical end. Right? And both sides have to allow the sharing request. Right? It's like, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Do you have any way to encrypt files, or you don't have, or can I get an app?
So as Jos maybe showed, we have server-side encryption. This encryption is an interesting topic. Right? Encryption, there's no one solution that helps for in every scenario. So we have server-side encryption where it can be used as in a way that you have only encrypted files on like Dropbox or your FTP server or your whatever, but you still have to trust your server. It still has to be your server.
So server-side encryption doesn't really help you if you can't trust the server. Then you need to encrypt the files before you upload them to the server. With server-side encryptions, the files on the server are indeed encrypted, but the moment you access them via the web interface, you of course have to give your password, and the server needs to be able to decrypt them before it sends them to you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to download them or see them. And the thing is, the moment the server is encrypting them, if someone has access to the server, they could get the encryption key from the memory of the server. So the encryption app does protect you in case the server is turned off and someone is steals the server. All the files will be encrypted on the server, and no, they will not be able to read them. But the moment the server is running and they gain access to it, they will, if they're smart enough, be able to get the key. So server-side encryption cannot protect you if you can't trust the server. Then you really need to do this locally. And there is simply at the moment no technology where you can have your cake and eat it too, where you can have a web interface, but still not trust the server. That's just currently technically not possible. So it helps a bit, but it doesn't fully protect you.
Yeah, question, with the federation?
Yeah.
Is the federated data encrypted?
The connection is done with HTTPS,
Oh, okay.
so SSL encrypted.
The server has
Yeah. So there are two ways. If the other server has a certificate which is trusted, that it just works. If you have a self-signed one, then you can import it in ownCloud. We have a nice web interface where you can manage like self-signed certificates from other parties that you collaborate with. Yes. Yes.
Can the shares be mounted in Linux and other operating systems?
Yeah.
Like, do something with that?
Yes. Yes. So we everything we do, we always check first if there's an open protocol, and if yes, we use it. If not, then well, we have to reinvent it. So which means all the file transfers done with WebDAV. And there's a WebDAV use mount, so if you can directly mount it if you want. Yeah. And by the way, all the other stuff like sharing and creating users and so on, they are all command line tools for this too in REST APIs. So you can script everything. You can all do this without a user interface if you want.
Because you said it's not a backup solution. If you do back it up with something,
Yeah.
assume backup data is encrypted still. Then how
So
do you restore the encrypted data?
yeah. So I mean, ownCloud is not really done as a backup solution. I mean, you can still do it. I mean, you can mount it via WebDAV, and you can like move all your data over there, and also enable encryption. This works. But to be honest, if this is the only thing you want to do, you can also use an FTP server. That's just the same.
If you wanted to back up your own cloud data.
Oh, your ownCloud data.
Right. If you want to back
Yes.
up your own cloud data and your own cloud data is
Yes.
encrypted, how do you restore your encrypted backup?
You can actually back up keys, right?
So
Okay, so your encrypted key.
So there's an encryption key. There's even a master encryption key that you can optionally enable. So because your user might lose their keys or forget their passwords. So it is possible that as an administrator you think, okay, I want to have like a recovery key.
Oh, so it's like a key change, but you have
Yes.
a master.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
But that's optional. I mean, this is like,
But
you have to
then
choose between the perfect security and the perfect
like I
usage.
said, you have to have some way to read back your encrypted backup
Yeah.
to restore it.
Yeah.
Otherwise it's useless.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you just back up your files and your keys together, then it's fine. I mean, yeah. The more questions?
And the keys are encrypted as your password, right?
Yes.
The key is actually stored on our cloud, so it's encrypted again with your password. So if users have a very short password,
Right.
the key is still very long.
Oh, so it's almost like a public-private thing where you have a password for your key.
Yeah.
Don't type it in.
Yeah. In fact, internally we use a public-private key pair because it's possible to share your files with others, and both are encrypted.
Right.
So it's actually a very sophisticated key management thing.
Oh, okay.
Other questions? Okay. Thanks.